Yorkie, I'm going to let you pick the first player of the. I have 10 on my list of who you want to get to first.
I love the guy. I love that clip. It went viral with Jordan Martinek when he goes, Svechnikov. Have you guys heard that one? It's so good. So everyone's talking about, because we could talk about the D. I know they need D. There's some guys out there, but I still think, and I've heard Stales talk about this, they need some character guys that can skate, have experience, play the right way, are not ancient as far as age goes. You don't want to bring a guy in that's like 34, 35, 36. But if you could find those guys that have played in the playoffs, they play hard. I just look at Jordan Martinook. He's a UFA this summer. To me, he checks a lot of boxes that Ottawa would be looking for. And I know, listen, there's when you play in Carolina, you usually never want to leave. You'll take a hometown discount. You'll stay there. Everybody loves it. The wives love it. They're set up pretty nicely. That is a guy that I think would look real nice in an Ottawa Senators uniform for a lot of those reasons and those support roles. And he's a good third liner that you get an injury, you could pop on the second line. You could play on your fourth line. I just think he'd be a great fit. He just does a lot of things, and he's been taught by Rod Brindamore to play the right way. He understands. He kills penalties for Carolina, one of the best penalty kill in the league. He would be a real nice support player for this group, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things I go back to, guys, when you look at, and I don't even know how you categorize Norris. I mean, I put a little circle around him where he's going to fit in. But the other thing everybody wants to do is if Norris is healthy, and say you slide him to the wing and have Pinto, everybody wants to throw all the top six forwards like DJ did on one line. You got to solidify, and everybody in the playoffs and anybody that's successful, start building some duos, start building the top nine. And I heard you talk last week, Yorkie, about a guy like Matthew Joseph. Matthew Joseph, and again, I know he tailed off at the end of the year, but he showed me, a little bit when he first came over, and certainly the first half of last year. If you put him in the right spot, he could complement. And I was a little surprised last year at the start of the year, he actually was making plays. He used to be activity and no achievement. There was some achievement, but back to your point on Martinic, basically what they need right now, if you take Norris out of the equation, they got 7 forwards for 9. They need to find, and what everyone wants to talk about, you're going to bring over, all these great players, and hey, okay, if you can pull off a major trade, great. Who's going back the other way? Be realistic, and they've got a fortify, and they haven't had. You could find a Martinic, and I know you mentioned Fogle on there, a couple of guys that not going to be the sexiest guys. They really lost when they lost Nick Paul, although, okay, I'll give Joseph. But what Curtis Brown provided for the group that they had, guys, those two players could have moved around the lineup, and they would have been in pretty good shape. And to your point, that's exactly what you should be looking for. Because realistically, to me, what's on the shopping list? You need a number one goaltender. You're not making the playoffs. You need someone to complement Shabbat, or you're basically wasting what's going to be a $10 million defenseman. So these aren't going to be as sexy, but they're real important. Solidify the top 9, figure out some young players, a Kastelik or Ostapchuk and some other guys that could be fourth line for whatever it is. But I totally agree. Those are the smart signings, and that's exactly what Ottawa needs to identify right now.
You might have to give an extra year to entice them to come with some more money, but it's just that it's like we talked about earlier. You look at the good teams, their bottom 6 or their third line, they have guys like this. And Stales has talked about it many times. You've seen it hinting at. I think they're going to go shopping. I believe, or try and mix. And even if, depending what they do, the Trickren move, like it's going to free up some money. What happens with Norris? Is he healthy? There'll be a way to find some money.
Yeah.
All right. By the way, people in the chat are fantastic today. I'm having a chat with them more than you. They are excited. We got a name off the board. So let's keep it rolling. As we stay with the forwards, William Carrier.
Oh, well, you like him? See, the thing that Ottawa is, he's not expensive. William Carrier is not. The only reason I put him on the list, again, if I'm another team, and I've heard this about Ottawa, they've become a very easy team to play against. And by easy, is I always look at it through a defenseman's lens. If I'm playing a team, I'll look at the lineup and I'll count the amount of guys in the forward group that are going to make me pay on the forecheck. And that's going to make me have to move the puck quicker. And Simmer, when you're in a locker room, what's the first game plan that your coach always says to you? We got to make it hard on the other team's D tonight. It's everything. It's like, you don't even have to have a team meeting. Okay, yeah, we know we have to make it hard on the other team's D.
Yeah.
If you look at Ottawa's forward group, besides Brady, who really scares you on the forecheck that's going to come in and finish you every single time? Like Vegas, they won a cup on just wearing teams down, but I like Carrier just because he would be a guy, and that's a pie in the sky type of thing. He's probably not leaving. He's probably going to go into the team, but that guy, he's always up there in hits. He makes you pay the price. He has won, and I just love it. It's another support player that, to me, is going to make this team tougher to play against.
Yeah, no, I agree. And he's also a player that, based on the depth that you end up having in Vegas, he starts on a fourth line. He only plays 10 minutes. But that's where you also have to identify. And it's some of the funny comments on guys' expectations. But when you look at Ottawa's group, well, first of all, if he's going to sign, his expectations would play in the top 9. He would be a foot soldier. He would be hard to play against. He'd identify all the things that you want to be if you're Ottawa. So, again, totally agree. And this is also, we'll get into the defenseman guys. But all these fantasy things, and we'll get into Pesce and other things, and you can scout all you want, but now you look situationally at American players and guy that's played in Carolina. Hey, this is Ottawa. They're rebuilding. There are a lot of positives going on. It's great ownership. It's also new management. Going to take a little time though. And as far as free agency, that's also where I'm realistic, guys, of more of you might look to make soft deals. Like it might be more realistic on soft deals at teams that with cap issues, because how many honestly free agents when it comes to, and I don't care what the contract is, it's difficult for Ottawa right now. Now, can you end up signing guys? But you got to be careful, because what free agent is that? Is at the bottom of the pile where you're going to give too much term or money to, where there are soft deals, and Ottawa has not taken advantage of other teams being in cap trouble, where maybe you grab a guy that's about 2.5, bring him in for a couple of years. And I mean, the Connor Brown move was a great move as a throw-in at the time. I mean, it was exactly what you dream of when you're looking to, bring in that foot soldier that can move around, be an excellent penalty killer.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I like those two guys too, because they're both under 30.
Yeah,
like I'm always scared when you bring in a guy that's mid-30s, because you're going to overpay, and the last 2 years you're gonna be buying him out.
By the way, he is since he's joined the Knights, he is second on the team in hits, 1,115 hits, 6'2", 220. So he's got great size.
Plays heavy.
Plays heavy.
Not
heavy. Okay. Third on the list, Warren Foegele. As we fly through these names, 6'2",
like
204. Averages 13 minutes of ice time. Got a career high in goals, assists, points this season. I like him.
Why do you like him, Wally?
I like his size. I like the speed. I like he's got a bite to him.
Yeah. He's got that redheaded power too. When you play with the redheads, they're always buzzing around there. They're tough to play against. It's just
Connor Brown.
You're right. They're a little crazy. Yeah. They're a little crazy. What do you think about him, Simmer?
Well, again, same thing, guys. I'm looking to solidify my top 9. He can play in my top 9. When you go back to Ottawa a couple of years ago, they had nobody on the fourth line or third line that could even elevate. I need somebody that can move around. Can he complement other people? Is he in a situation? I'm not expecting Zach Hyman to come in, and obviously Ottawa doesn't have those players, but that would be, and the Norris thing is so tricky to plan around. What is he going to be? Where are you going to play him? I can't go out and spend the $8 million. And the other people talk about, well, you're going to flip him. Well, obviously that's not going to happen. And then you get into quite simply with him, you're cheering for him. I want him to do well. Can he recover as a young age and come back? But you're tagged to $8 million. What is he going to be as a hockey player? What value is he going to be to your team? But point being, if he's healthy, if you're projecting to do that, I need one more guy. And I'm confident that, if you're confident going into the year, that based on Stützle, Pinto, Gregg, and say Kastelic is your 4, if that's what you're going to build around, find another winger that you can solidify your top 9 with. And any of those 3 guys would end up fitting that bill, because realistically, internally, they don't have anybody coming through the system, and they don't have anybody on the roster right now that can move out of that fourth line role. So it's important, at least on paper, have a top 9. Now figure out what the combos and duos and trios are going to end up being.
You look at I was watching Foegele the other night when Edmonton locked down that last series, and he's just buzzing around. He reminds me a little bit of Matthew Joseph, a little more skill. He got 20 goals this year, and everybody will say, well, why isn't he scoring in the playoffs that much? Well, Edmonton's the only team in the league that lets their first power play stay on for the entire 2 minutes. So, that's what always makes me laugh at Edmonton. Like, why come nobody else scores there? Well, because these guys, they take every offensive draw, McDavid, and why wouldn't you? McDavid, Draisaitl, and the Nuge and Hymans, they get all the looks all the time. Everybody else is out there to create energy. But Fogel's interesting because he's 28 years old. He's played over 70 playoff games already, and I love his speed. He's 6'2". And those are just three guys. Maybe like you're not going to get all three, but it's just to me, those are three guys like we've been talking about that would be real nice fits, and it could potentially be like a Matthew Joseph was to start the year. Fast.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the pro scouting guys. And you go back again, like think of how crazy the Stepan move was. A second round pick. Like it was ridiculous. Like you had a guy right away that couldn't play, and then he gets injured. If you're scouts, and they've turned over the scouting staff, and I don't know, but I'm a big Dave Poulin guy, and he's pretty aware of what's going on. He's got a great network. Those simple things where you identify somebody. And I also, from an Edmonton perspective, have a conspiracy theory. They also put Zach Hyman on the power play for the full 2 minutes because they love that every time he scores, that goes back into the Toronto media. that's all anybody talks about is Zach Hyman and the Leafs letting him go. So that's also part of it. But again, this is where the small identification, you brought up Trocheck, these little moves that teams end up making. And I look at Bill Zito. I wasn't sure how Billy was going to do in Florida. And then I go through some of his moves initially, and even the Tkachuk one, I wasn't sure. And then I start to look at it's move after move after move that he hits on. Yeah. You're bringing in guys, and you're like, well, oh my God, where did Verhaeghe? Where did you identify that? Who identified that player? Some of the defensemen that he had bring in. I mean, it has been absolutely incredible, and that's completely the difference of that drafted core in Florida where they're at comparison to where Ottawa's at.
So I used to do a bunch of games for Sportsnet, and I do the Calgary Flames, and they basically couldn't wait to get Sam Bennett out of town.
Yeah,
Florida. You look how important Sam Bennett is to that Florida Panthers identity, their culture.
Oh man,
he knocked Marchand out of the last series. He plays hard. He is everything you want in a player on your team, and he's that much more important during the playoffs. Tough to find guys like that. He'll scratch your eyes out, do whatever he can, punch. Like basically, we all saw the play with Marchand. But man, it's hard to find those guys. But
and that was a real solid play because even on the camera angle, it was hard to see what he was sneaking in. It's a little bit like the elbow last night. You don't really think it's really that big of a deal. And here's the other thing about Sam Bennett, Yorkie and Wally. This is the part of Canadian market. This is a part of being a super high pick. Couldn't do a chin up. Couldn't do anything. Ended up with injuries. Okay, now Sam Bennett. He doesn't care where he ends up going. He goes somewhere now. Nobody in Florida. First of all, they have no idea who I am. Just another bald man in Florida. You go there, and all of a sudden you have a fresh lease on life. I can play greasy. I can do whatever I want. I'm brought in to be a role player. Nobody cares that I was a high pick, and I don't care anymore. I just want to contribute. And again, another thing about identifying, taking somebody out of a situation being used properly where he was never going to meet those expectations when he played in Calgary.
Somebody chirped him. There's a clip on the ice. It's one of those things where the players were mic'd and they chirped him about being bald, and he's like, "Really?"
No, and you know who it was. And again, I don't want to get carried away. I really lost a lot of respect for Max Domi. It was Max Domi that did it.
Oh, chirped him, eh?
Yeah, but Max Domi that year that Smith here in Ottawa got waived. And do you remember in the preseason, they got into a fight and he was yelling waivers at him? I was like, okay, man. And then he's had a series here and that was exactly who was doing it. And I just wanted Bennett to grab a hold of him and just wail on him because it was like, whatever, man. And then this is also coming from another bald man. I was really offended by that.
You were hurt. You were hurt.
Exactly.
Bald guys matter, right? You guys matter.
All goalies, Craig Anderson, Alex Auld.
Yeah.
It's the whole group of you.
Yeah. It's from wearing the mask. That's what I love when people come up with that. Did you wear a hat a lot as a kid? I think there might be a tad more to it than that, but hey, got to work with what you got. Maybe I'll head to Turkey over the summer and do a nice little growth on the front.
To Turkey? Is that how they rock? Is that what they do in Turkey?
Well, they do it in Turkey and Lebanon. And the joke is that everybody coming back is wrapped up in Band-Aids. The whole flight back from Istanbul to Toronto is full of Canadian men that have gotten hair transplants. It's like $400. It's sheep hair, but it's still, or actually I'd go with the goat. Hey, and here's one Yorkie I'll say, and he was ahead of his time. Unfortunately, he wasn't good. Poor Robbie Brown was one of the first to get the hair transplant.
Oh boy!
Oh yeah, Bobby Hall actually. Do you remember Bobby Hall?
Well, I don't really. And then the other thing that happened in Minnesota is, I don't know if Cy Sperling lived there, but there was a small point where the entire Minnesota North Stars hockey team had hairpieces.
Oh, yeah. I think Bellows used to get. There's a clip too of Bellows getting chirped by the New York Islanders bench. Hey, nice rug, Bellows.
John Casey. You had a whole bunch.
Did you hear the story? I think was Casey in St. Louis for a bit.
Yeah.
Okay,
because the famous Brett Hull goal is on John Casey, is it not? The Iserman off the bar.
So there's one of my buddies was in St. Louis, and he said they had won a game, and everybody skates out and they're patting the goalies, and Casey had his helmet off. And I guess one of the guys was rubbing his head, and his rug fell off, and it was lying on the ice, and he's scrambling to pick up his rug. Can you imagine the horror?
The only thing worse than the rug coming off is when they try to place it back on their head.
How's that look? Oh, it looks great.
That was where I not that he had the rug, but I used to love the clips of Mark Pesce when they won the cup. He wouldn't take his helmet off. He'd have the Winwell helmet on. I'm like, what's going on here? This is back to Pee Wee hockey. We win the championship. You throw your helmet up in the air. There he is, presented with the cup. He's got his helmet on. He looks so much better when he trimmed her down too. I don't know what took him so long. Like he's got the perfect head for the baldness. Hey,
it fits.
Anyway, there's a great story written by WHA ref about the fight the night Bobby Hull got into a fight and a guy pulled his air plugs out and there's just blood everywhere. Anyway, it's wild to listen.
I met him at the Pure Later Cup years ago in Gloucester, and he had some. That was no longer plugs. That was a live animal.
Okay, so. All right, so let's move on.
Why do you wear that rug? That's like the scene out of Slapshot.
Oh, absolutely. One of our old marketing guys in Washington, I used to do a post-game interview with one of the players, and I think we were playing the Rangers, and the fans were yelling at me and screaming, and the gentleman that was kind of trying to protect, he's like, why don't you just go away? I'll never forget it. There's a whole crowd, and the guy looks down, he goes, nice rug, buddy. And everybody just scrambled like mice. It was like... There was no comeback, nothing. Everyone just headed for the locker room. It was like we all had to hydrate after that.
So good.
There's a new idea coming for the show if Simmer comes back, and that is brought to you by Eric, who says Wally needs a buzzer. Just basically.
We might have to do the Donald Trump mute. We might have to just you'd like the show on ESPN. You get muted for a little bit.
Oh yes. Okay. So we're gonna have to get through some of these names. I'm skipping over Dylan DeMello. We've talked about him enough.
Yeah,
I will say he was second in the NHL in plus minus this year. He is career high in assists and points. There's no question Dylan DeMello would be a perfect fit.
Yeah.
I'm also going to skip Brandon Montour, who we've talked about a lot. Unless you guys have a really big
he's not going anywhere. They're re-signing him.
Well, what a find! Another guy. Talk about a find, right? I mean, one of the most underrated defensemen in the National Hockey League. And again, realistically, is he going anywhere? And then from a price tag standpoint, you're talking about Sanderson, Shabbat on dollars out the door is 10 million defenseman. You're not looking. That's not even on your radar. And go back to just a quick thing on Dylan DeMello, guys. And again, where does he fit? How does he play? This is also from an Ottawa Senators perspective. Be realistic about what you're bringing in. And he did have time with Shabbat. He is a compliment to that. That may be what, at the end of the day, you end up settling on versus some of these other big name players. Is that realistic? And again, if that's what you can do, and if that's able to settle Shabbat a little bit, turn his game around, it's a worthy investment. They have not invested in protecting a $10 million, $8 million cap hit, $10 million defenseman. Yep. It's real important that they identify that this summer, not just bringing in another defenseman.
Montour would be imagine that we start all over again of trying to figure out how to get Montour. We got now, how do we get him on the power play? We got Shabbat, we got Sanderson, we got Montour. Oh shit. It starts all over again. Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Question, but here's another thing about those guys. When you talk about like Will Carrier or Brandon Montour, guys with no state tax, you're gonna have to pay a whole lot more than they're being paid now to get them to come. I understand, but Brandon Montour at 3.5 million in Florida is a lot higher in Canada.
He's
going to get as a free agent though. We're talking $6, $7, $8 million.
Yes.
And then,
but then
at the same time, guys, like Meth is so honest about everything he talks about in a sense of, okay, I could live in Dallas. I can live in Florida. I don't care if Canada has no state tax and I'm making more money. It's not a level playing field to start with, realistically, for a lot of players. And you just want to be honest. And here's the other thing that you're going to, Yorkie, you know this. If you're going to start dealing with older players, you're dealing with married players generally. And married players is a whole different ballgame of where they're going, because obviously who has a lot of say in where you're going to end up playing? The wife does. Yep. And that's so that right there is a completely different ballgame than the young single guy that's drafted by a team and doesn't know any better. And he loves it. That's what the Edmonton Oilers were built on and won cups. Those guys didn't know any better. Now, as they got older, what'd they do? They all ended up signing with the New York Rangers. But initially, if you're bringing these players in, it's going to be real hard. And that's where I think soft deals from an Ottawa perspective are probably going to be a little bit more realistic. Or on a case of Dylan DeMello, who has been here, seemed to like it, has played in Winnipeg, seemed to like it. You know, is that realistic that you can circle back on a player like that?
Okay. Brady Shea, Carolina. Carolina's got some decisions to make. They've got a few UFAs. Brady Shea, 6'3", 210. He's led all Sens defensemen in scoring with 47 points this year, setting a new career high for points in a season with Brady Shea. So plays 20 minutes a night. Is he a viable option for you, Yorkie?
No.
And the only issue is you put him on the list. He shoots left.
No, I didn't put him on he wasn't on my list. He's a really, really good defenseman, but in a perfect world, I'm taking Brett Pesce all day long. To me, he's too similar to what you already have. He's a puck moving, skating defenseman. He can defend, but I don't want to go back into that whole left shot thing. I like, and if you watch how the NHL is played now, the defensemen are always wide in the offensive zone because they call this relieving the pressure. So a lot of teams do that now. They do automatic rims around the boards, and the D are waiting there to really. He's a release valve. Mm-hmm. When you're on your right side, those plays are way easier to do. Everyone clogs up the middle as well. So the middle of the ice is always in the neutral zone clogged up. If your stick's on the middle and you're a lefty, when you go D to D, it's really hard to go D to D and hit that far forward. So for me, I love right side, left side. And I think in today's NHL, it's even more important. So I don't want Shea because I don't want another left shot defenseman, even though he's still a good player.
Well,
yeah, I totally agree on that.
It was on some list.
Well, no, exactly. I was just going through and looking at defensemen and having the discussion, but on that, and this is where when the Chychrun trade was made. I mean, again, if you know, and I've seen a guy for years as a left shot be very successful as a right defenseman, okay, I'm all over it. But this experiment, like, I'm going to volunteer to end up playing the right side, that's great. Neither Chabot or Chychrun handling the forecheck, coming out under pressure, Yorkie. And as you said, unless you're Chris Chelios and you're switching hands to hold the puck in, then forget it. But no, at the end of the day, and that's where, as I said, this idea that you bring in another guy, what does Jacob Chychrun end up being? He ends up being your third left defenseman. You know, you can't end up doing that. And that's where, as I said, if Thomas Chabot, to me, is properly coached, I still have a lot of faith in him. Not to mention, I don't think he's going anywhere. You don't have to. You shouldn't have to find the sexiest player out there. You should be able to bring in somebody and find a fit. I go back to Ron Hainsey playing with Morgan Riley at the end of his career. He came in, and it was just simple. It was smart. And as you said, it was reliable. That's what Thomas Chabot needs right now. And to the point on Brady Shea, and I'll also go back from a pro scouting standpoint, I'm always curious when a team trades a good young defenseman even for a first-round pick. Because one hand I say, well, if he's that good, why do you ever trade him? Carolina gave up a first-round pick. That was pretty good identification. And then you say to yourself, it was like for years with Anaheim where they said, they've got all these great defensemen. Well, the only great defenseman they ended up having out of that whole group was Theodore. And they ended up letting him go, and he's just been a rock and rolling in Vegas. So identification, but again, absolutely has to be a right shot for Thomas Chabot, and you don't have to blow the bank financially.
Let's go to Brett Pesce, who's in Carolina.
Yeah, love him. That's from what I hear, and listen, I don't know Brett Pesce from a hole in the wall, but he seems to be a guy that's going to take a little bit of a discount to stay there. But I think he's going to get a huge, huge dollar amount. To me, this guy is exactly what Ottawa needs. 6'3", tons of experience, right shot, can defend. plays 20 minutes a night. And the great thing about him, he's not a power play guy. He's going to come in here and just move the puck, play defense, and be super, super dependable. I just think it's going to be, to me, he's the most attractive right shot D on the market right now. And there is going to be a lot. There's going to be a lineup for this guy. Well, who else is out there that's a right shot D? That I know Montour, but he's not going anywhere. He's Florida's number one.
We have a
defenseman.
list of them, Yorkie. We also got Tyler Myers on the list, or Chris Tanev, or
the scary thing with those guys, and I love Tanev as a player, they're approaching mid-30s. Pesce, if you decide to go a little longer on the contract, it doesn't scare me just because of his age. I know he was injured, but it was just a little crack on the ankle there as a bottom of the leg break. That's not a serious injury. I'm telling you, this guy's going to make a lot of money this summer.
Yorkie, and again, people that have identified in hockey, absolutely. And here's the other thing, and I know, Wally, you mentioned his hit totals. I don't know what Jake Sanderson's hit totals are. I'm not following the stats. Here's what Jake Sanderson does, and we'll go back to Nick Lidstrom. They separate people from the puck, and whether you consider that a hit or not, technically, what would be more important for me? Now, I'm not expecting, I'm not talking about being Jacob Trouba, but the whole part of hockey is actually having the puck. And do I want physical defensemen? Absolutely. What he does, like Lidstrom, like Jake Sanderson, he separates people from the puck. He doesn't necessarily make contact, but he's a big body. He doesn't have to. He's so bloody smart. And you want to talk about a dream compliment for Thomas Chabot? This is the dream player. Now, American, played his full career in Carolina, 9 years. Is he coming to Ottawa? I mean, you better roll out something. It would be, and this would also be, you would have to pay him so much money in term that he couldn't turn it down. And then does he honestly want to be here? So as I said, I don't think that's very realistic because, hey, he'll probably go back to Carolina and say, listen, I'll take a little discount. Here's what I'm being offered. But as far as teams around the National Hockey League, I mean, he's a stud. He's a stud defenseman that, as I said, sometimes you don't have to notice a guy's Wally. You know what I mean? Sometimes you go to games and it doesn't have to be a huge hit. Doesn't have to be running a power play. Sometimes, exactly. And then go back to Lidstrom, go back to Jake Sanderson. Sometimes just smart defenseman. The best thing he did all night was, wow, didn't even notice him, but man, did he play a hell of a game.
It's
Carolina, 49 hits, by the way.
Yeah. Well, same with, if you watch Jacob Slavin play, he doesn't hit anybody. He takes the puck away. It's body position. It's having a good stick. During the regular season, there's no hitting. There's very little hitting. Playoffs, totally different animal. You want these D. What did Luke? We had Luke on the other day. Every single team is looking for big, long defensemen with reach, can skate, move the puck. If you took Brett Pesce, that's his scouting report. Right there.
Yeah. Right there. And I'm not saying it changes the identity of the player, but I'm also very leery of the stats guys when it comes to hits as well. I just think of my buddy Brendan Witt when he played with the Islanders. I think he had 3,000 hits. Like the Islanders was the most ridiculous. And as I said, 49. Wally, I'm not going to pretend like all of a sudden he's, like I said, out there being Scott Stevens. But some of these stats and how important is it? I mean, European brand hockey, I always say is a mentality thing. What do they say? And this is where they laugh at Canadians on the 200-foot ice. Guy would run down on the forecheck, Wendell Clark or Lindros, and they'd run the guy over, and they'd kind of look at you like, listen, the play's already to the other end. You've wasted all this energy coming and trying. You didn't even separate me from the puck. But Europeans play through the hands. They play smart. And the whole idea, and come playoff time, is winning puck battles and possessing the puck. And that's all you said. We go back to the St. Louis defense. You go back to Vegas's defense last year. Nothing sexy, just big bodies. Wear you down in long playoffs, separate you from the puck, make it look easy, and then you just move on.
I'm skipping Tyler Myers on the list. One, he played a career low this year, but I think he's too expensive. I also say this on
the only other thing, guys, a little point on Tanev and Myers. You've got Green, where had him for a couple of years in Vancouver. So you've got the intel right there. You've got the feel, and so, hey, they're going to be more than, is it realistic? How would he fit? And the whole identification that I'm asking myself is, who would fit with Thomas Chabot? And if a player is a little bit older for the short term, again, these are some of the things being realistic about Ottawa. We can talk about all the great players and all the big names. Yeah. What would be a fit for Thomas Chabot, and what's realistic? And you might have to, and again, I go back to Hainsey in Toronto. You might have to bite the bullet a little bit if you want to, but you have to solidify that. First of all, the right side D is not strong enough after Zub, in my estimation. They're not good enough. And at the same time, I've got to find someone to help my $10 million defenseman in Thomas Chabot.
Yeah,
I just think
100%.
Tyler Myers makes $6 million. Is he going to take a pay cut?
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's a guy. All right, go ahead, Yorkie, and then I have a guy.
No, finish your thought.
Well, I want to move on to another player. So if you want to talk,
okay, I would just say last thing on Myers, he'd look good in your bottom pairing. You got those two towers if you decide to bring. If Clevin has a great summer, imagine those two monsters in your third pairing. Be a pretty good mentor for Clevin too.
Yeah, and I'll give Myers credit because he got booed out of Buffalo because he's also, I'll say, a bit of a Bouwmeester effect, and he's not as big a body. He's not the same player. But I'll tell you what, playing in Winnipeg, kind of got riled out of there. Winnipeg or Vancouver fans not easy on him. I don't know if he'd want to sign up with Ottawa because he's always going to be faced with. He's not a hard player. He's a big body. People don't appreciate what he can do, and they're always expecting him to run people through the boards. And when he signed that ridiculous contract in Buffalo, it's basically what Darnell Nurse is going through the same thing right now. You know what I mean? He looks so scared on the ice right now. Doesn't want the puck. Doesn't want to do anything. That contract, and we had Thomas Caberlet in Toronto. Was funny, Yorkie, because he went to Fergie and he said, "Listen, I want a good contract, but I don't want a contract where the fans are going to be all over me." Well, they saved that for McCabe. But he didn't want to be just too far up where all of a sudden people were going to be on him and identifying him. And that's saying, Canada, man, if you want to take the big bucks, that's awesome, but you better deliver.
Well, okay, that's what happened to Wade Redden. Reds took it. He had the big contract. Philly was making quite a bit less. Who'd the fans get on?
Yeah, and also you lost Char.
Yeah, there you go. All right, who's next, Wally?
That's a whole other story. Okay, Dallas. Yanni Hakanpää.
Is he even playing in the playoffs?
Is this a real person? Because I'm putting this all on Yorkie. I tried to do, and what was the Hakan that the Sens ended up with a few years ago? This guy sounds like a reindeer farmer somewhere.
Are you talking Yuri Jokipaka?
Oh yeah. But this guy sounds like he herds reindeer in northern Finland.
Listen.
And so this one's on you. I don't know anything about
He's too old. He's like 30. The guy.
Wait a second. He's 32, and you were like, "Well, that's Brandon Montour's 33."
Yeah, but
he's a seasoned veteran.
But Montour's this guy isn't even established in the league yet. Like he's a player.
Listen, you're not going to get the first line player every time to play on the Ottawa Senators. You're going to have to do some smart decision making here and identify a player. 6'5", 218.
Ooh.
Led the Stars in hits. Was third in block shots this season. Played 18 minutes a night.
How many games has he played in the playoffs so far?
By the way, here we go. How many games has Brady Tkachuk played in the playoffs?
No, but is he dressing for the Dallas Stars in the playoffs?
No, I think that's what he meant. Well, eligible for the actual playoffs, how much is he playing versus as his teammate? That's like Ryan O'Reilly. I thought he was totally cursed you go from Colorado, you go to Buffalo, and you say to yourself, okay, does this follow this guy around? And then you get to St. Louis there in last place, and you're like, oh my God, this guy is either not very good or he has the worst luck possible. Well, what happens? They make the playoffs, wins the cup, wins the Conn Smythe. Again, I find the whole playoff and Stanley Cup thing, and I think back to like a Dale Hunter. Okay, he didn't win a Stanley Cup. Like, who cares? At the end of the day, there's nothing more he could have done in his career. So, but as far as a fella, and this is also, I don't know the player, guys. But this is when you do have good pro scouting. There may be a defenseman out there that Dave Poulin or the staff or Stayos or somebody identifies and says, listen, this isn't going to get our fan base all fired up and people aren't going to be, talking about a guy like Pesce, but this is where we identify the right player. And in the United States, it's so much easier to do that because they have no idea who the players are. So you just tell them that he's good. In Canada here, we got to break it down all the time. But like I said, that's realistically where I think Ottawa's at, maybe in identifying the defenseman, but also as you talk about Yorkie on some of the foot soldiers.
Yeah. I don't know the player that well either. He plays in Dallas. I'm just looking at his stats. He's big. He's playing on it is a good thing if you're on a really good team, even though you're not dressed, you're going through the playoff experience. He did play a little bit with Carolina in the playoffs before and has played with Dallas in the playoffs. So, yeah, who knows? Maybe he could be a guy that comes in your third pairing, but I'd be lying if I said I knew anything about this guy. But he's big. He's big.